I still remember the way the light looked that morning. Soft, pale, barely touching the edge of my curtains. The world was quiet, the kind of quiet you only hear before sunrise, when even the birds are still deciding whether they want to wake up. I was lying in bed, half asleep, half drifting in a dream, when I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder. Not hurried, not frightened, just soft, almost hesitant. And then I heard his voice. "Mom, can I talk to you?" It was my son. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. He never woke me up this early. He was always the kind of child who tried not to disturb anyone. So when I opened my eyes and saw him standing there, shoulders slightly bent, fingers twisted together, eyes not quite meeting mine, something inside me tightened. I sat up slowly. "Are you okay?" I asked. He nodded, but his face didn't match the answer. He looked like he had spent the whole night thinking. Like he was carrying something too heavy for his age. Like he wasn't sure if he had the right to wake me up. The room was dim. Only a faint wash of blue coming through the window. I could barely see his expression, but I could feel it. You know how mothers feel things long before they understand them? That's how it was. He took a small breath. His voice trembled a little. "Mom, I need to ask you something. And please don't get upset." My heart sank. Because children don't speak like that unless something inside them is hurting. "I'm not upset," I said. "Tell me." He sat at the edge of my bed, still not looking at me. The silence between us felt strange, like a wall had been built when I wasn't paying attention. Then, finally, he whispered the words that changed everything. "Mom, do you still want me here?" The world went still. I didn't move. I couldn't breathe. I felt those words settle deep inside me, colder than the morning air, heavier than anything I had felt in years. And in that moment, I realized something I had been too busy, too tired, too distracted to see. My son had been hurting, quietly, silently, right next to me. And somehow, without meaning to, I had let him feel alone. That morning was the moment that pulled me backward, into memories, into mistakes, into all the things I had missed. The moment that made me ask myself, how long had my child been waiting to say those words? When I think about how we reached that morning, I have to go far back. Not to the moment things went wrong, but to the time everything felt gentle. The days when my son was small, and life moved at a softer pace. You know, when children are little, you believe the bond you share with them is unbreakable. You believe that the love you give is enough to carry you through anything. And maybe it is. But life has a way of shifting the ground beneath your feet without telling you. My son was a quiet child from the very beginning. Not shy, just thoughtful. Even as a baby, he didn't cry much. He would look at me with wide, patient eyes as if he was always waiting for me to understand what he couldn't say yet. I remember his tiny hands grabbing the ends of my sari when he learned to walk. The way he laughed when I clapped for him. How he used to run around the kitchen while I cooked, always stopping to check if I was watching. He loved being seen. Children do. They bloom under attention the way flowers bloom under sunlight. And back then, I gave him everything I had. Our home was small, nothing fancy. An old wooden dining table with a shaky leg. The familiar hum of the ceiling fan. A window that let in too much rain during monsoons. But it was warm. It was ours. My husband worked long hours. He was good, steady, dependable, but his job kept him away more than it kept him home. So most days, it was just me and my son. We created our own rhythm. A little world within the world. We would eat breakfast together. Just toast and tea for me, a warm glass of milk for him. He would sit on the counter, swinging his legs, telling me stories about the shapes he saw in the clouds or the dreams he had during the night. I used to listen, really listen. Those moments felt endless. I think that's why it hurts so much now, knowing that somewhere along the way, those little stories stopped coming, and I didn't even notice the quiet that replaced them. But at the time, life was simple. As he grew older, he carried that same gentle nature with him. He was the kind of child who said thank you even when he didn't have to. The one who stood a little too straight during school pictures. The one whose teachers always said, "Such a polite boy, so easy to teach." He was easy to love too. And I loved him more than anything. But love, I've learned, is not always enough. Not when life keeps pulling you in different directions. When my son turned 10, things began to change for me. Not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet, everyday way that slowly piles up. My job became more demanding. My mother fell sick. Household responsibilities grew heavier. I felt stretched thin, like a piece of cloth worn out from being washed too many times. I would come home tired, bone tired, sit down for a moment and feel the weight of the day push my shoulders down. And somewhere in that exhaustion, I started to lose small pieces of myself. Pieces I didn't realize my son needed. He would still come to me, still try to tell me stories, still wait for the attention that once came so easily. But I began to answer with, "Not right now. Later. I'm tired. Can we talk after dinner? Maybe tomorrow." And every time I said later, he stepped a little farther away without me seeing it. You never notice the moment distance begins. It's never loud. It's never dramatic. It slips in quietly, like fog rolling over a field, slowly covering everything you thought was clear. I wish I could tell you I caught it early. I wish I could say I saw the signs. But the truth is, I didn't. I told myself that all children become quieter as they grow. That he was just getting older. That this was normal. And maybe some of that was true. But not all of it. There were moments, small ones, that should have made me pause. Like the evening he waited at the kitchen door with his school notebook, hoping I would look at his drawing, but I told him, "I'm busy," without even glancing up. Or the day he sat beside me on the sofa, trying to talk about something that happened at school, and I nodded without hearing a single word. Or the night he came into my room, wanting to sleep beside me because he had a bad dream, and I told him he was too old for that now. I wasn't cruel. I was just tired. But tiredness can build walls just as easily as anger can. And he, being who he was, never pushed. He stepped back quietly. He made space for my exhaustion. He waited for a better moment. But moments don't appear on their own. You have to make them. And I wasn't making any. Slowly, he stopped coming to me with drawings. Stopped sitting beside me on the sofa. Stopped bringing his small joys to share. He spent more time in his room. More time alone. More time trying not to disturb me. He was becoming careful around me. Too careful. That's the thing about sensitive children. They learn your moods before they understand their own. They watch your face, your tone, your sighs, and they absorb all of it silently. I didn't realize he had learned to walk around my exhaustion the way people walk around broken glass, slowly, carefully, afraid of stepping wrong. And I was too lost in my responsibilities to see his carefulness as a warning. Some evenings I tried to fix it. I would sit beside him and ask, "How was your day?" But by then, he had learned short answers. Good. Fine. Nothing much. I told myself he was growing up. I told myself this was normal. But in the quiet of some nights, after the dishes were washed and the house went still, I felt a small ache in my chest. A feeling I tried to ignore. The feeling that I was missing something. Something important. Something slipping away. Yet, even then, I didn't understand the depth of what was happening. Because distance in a home doesn't happen with shouting. It happens with silence. A silence that grows so slowly you begin to believe it belongs there. Looking back now, I can see it clearly, the small moments that were asking me to pay attention. The questions behind his quiet. The emotions behind his politeness. The fading sparkle when he spoke. But back then, I kept moving through life on tired feet, convinced that love alone would hold everything together. I didn't see the cracks forming. I didn't see the light dimming in my own child. I didn't see the way he watched me, hoping for the mother I used to be. And I certainly didn't see the question growing inside him, the question he would one day wake me before sunrise to ask. A question a child should never have to wonder. A question that would stop my heart when I finally heard it. Do you still want me here? But the story of how he reached that point, that story was built over years. In little moments. Quiet days. Missed chances. And though I didn't know it at the time, every later, every tired sigh, every distracted nod was slowly building the distance that he carried into that sunrise. A distance I would spend months trying to understand. And years trying to repair. If I had to point to one season of my life when everything began shifting, not suddenly, but slowly like a long shadow stretching across the floor, it would be the years when my son entered his teens. People talk about adolescence like it's a storm. Loud, unpredictable, full of arguments and slammed doors. But for us, it wasn't like that at all. Our storm was quiet. Too quiet. My son didn't rebel. He didn't shout. He didn't demand space. He just stepped into it quietly. And I was too busy, too tired, too absorbed in the rhythm of daily life to hear the soft footsteps of change. Back then, my days blurred into each other. Morning chores, cooking, office calls, caring for my sick mother, keeping up with bills, worrying about the future. Even when I was physically present at home, my mind was elsewhere. And my son, he learned to meet my tiredness with silence. He stopped interrupting, stopped asking for help, stopped reminding me of his small needs. It's strange how silence can feel peaceful at first. You mistake it for calm. You tell yourself everything is fine. You even appreciate the quiet, until you realize the quiet came at a cost. There were so many moments, small ones, that I wish I could go back to. Moments when he tried to reach for me, but I wasn't there in the way he needed. There was one afternoon I remember clearly. I had just come home from the hospital after sitting with my mother for hours. My back hurt. My head hurt. My heart hurt. I dropped my bag on the dining table and sank into a chair, feeling like I was carrying the weight of 10 years on my shoulders. My son walked up to me holding a sheet of paper, some sort of school project he had worked on. He said softly, "Mom, can I show you something?" And without even looking up, I said, "Not now. I'm tired." He didn't argue. He didn't ask again. He simply folded the paper in half and walked back to his room. I didn't think about it again until much later. Another time, he stood by the kitchen doorway while I washed dishes. I didn't even notice him at first. He was just standing there, fingers tapping against his leg like he was practicing courage. He finally spoke. "Mama, can we talk?" "After I finish," I said without turning around. But after I finished, he wasn't there anymore. And I didn't go looking for him. Maybe that's what hurts the most now. Not the moments I said no, but the moments I didn't see he needed me to say yes. As the months passed, the changes became clearer. He still did everything he was supposed to. He went to school. He kept his room neat. He was polite at the dinner table. But the warmth, the effortless closeness we once had, was fading. He began eating earlier than us, leaving his plate in the sink before I could see him. He went to bed earlier too, closing his door gently, as if afraid to disturb me. Sometimes, I would open the door a little and see him pretending to be asleep. I knew he was pretending because he always left one shoe in the wrong direction when he got ready for bed. But he stopped correcting it when he knew I was nearby. He didn't want conversation. Or maybe he did, but he didn't think he should ask for it anymore. One night, I remember sitting alone in the living room. It was raining outside, the kind of rain that makes the whole world feel heavy and soft. I could hear the sound of his footsteps leaving the kitchen. Not hurried, just quiet. I called out, "Did you eat?" "Yes," he said. His voice was polite. Too polite. The kind of polite that replaces love when love starts feeling uncertain. "Okay," I replied. And that was it. That was our entire conversation. I think that was the moment I felt the ache most strongly. Something was missing. Something important. But I didn't know how to name it. I didn't know how to fix what I couldn't fully understand. I told myself I would talk to him the next day. But the next day came and went. And then the next. And then another. We kept living side by side like two people sharing a house instead of a home. The distance didn't shout. It whispered. It whispered in the empty chair beside me at breakfast. In the quiet living room where laughter used to be. In the soft, polite "Good night, Mom," spoken from a doorway instead of the foot of my bed. He wasn't angry. He wasn't upset. He was disappearing gently. And I didn't know how to call him back. There was a week, maybe the hardest week of that year, when everything seemed to press down on me at once. My mother's health declined. My husband had to travel for work. I was juggling too much, sleeping too little, and barely holding myself together. One evening, as I was talking to a friend on the phone, I said something I wish I could take back. I said, I'm so tired. I don't know how to handle everything anymore. I didn't mean him. I never meant him. I meant life. The heaviness. The feeling of drowning in responsibilities. But he heard only one thing. He heard the word, everything. And like many sensitive children do, he placed himself inside that word. After that night, he changed even more. He became careful with his footsteps. Careful with his words. Careful with his needs. He apologized for things he didn't need to apologize for. He thanked me for things he had never thanked me for before. He stepped around me like someone trying not to wake a sleeping lion, even though I was never a lion. Just a tired mother. I didn't know he had heard me. I didn't know he misunderstood. I didn't know he carried those words to bed with him, curled them around his heart, let them grow into a quiet fear. A fear that he was part of my exhaustion. A fear that he was a burden. A fear that he wasn't wanted. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. One morning, I asked him if he wanted to go to the market with me like we used to. He shook his head and said, "You go. I don't want to bother you." I laughed lightly and said, "You never bother me." But I didn't look up from the vegetables I was washing. And he walked away thinking my words were just words, not truth. Another evening, I brought home sweets for him. His favorite. He took the box, smiled politely, and said, "Thank you, Mom," in a way that made my heart ache. That smile didn't reach his eyes. It was the smile of someone grateful for your effort, but uncertain of your love. One night, when I walked past his room, I heard him crying quietly. Not loudly. Not enough to be heard unless you were really listening. And I stood outside his door, my hand on the doorknob, frozen. I told myself he needed his space. I told myself he was growing. I told myself boys get emotional sometimes. But the truth is simpler. I was afraid to ask what was wrong. Afraid that the answer might be something I didn't know how to handle. So I walked away. And that became the pattern. Every day, a little more distance. Every night, a little more silence. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was gentle, slow, and painfully quiet. Like watching a flower close its petals at dusk, thinking it will open again in the morning, and then realizing you forgot to give it water for months. The moment that finally forced everything into the light happened one late evening. I was cleaning the living room when I found a sheet of paper under the sofa. When I opened it, I saw a drawing. His drawing from months ago. The one he had tried to show me. The one I told him I was too tired to look at. It was crumpled. Folded at the corners. A little torn. But what hurt most wasn't the drawing. It was the small line of text written at the bottom in his careful handwriting. "I hope Mom likes it when she has time." I sat there on the floor, holding that paper, feeling a slow heaviness rise in my chest. Not sadness. Not guilt. Something deeper. A realization. He was waiting for me. He had been waiting for so long. And I had been giving him nothing but excuses. That night was the first time I cried in months. I cried quietly, the same way he did. And in that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. I'll talk to him tomorrow. I'll fix this. I'll reach out. But tomorrow came with more responsibilities. More exhaustion. More distractions. More life. And my promise fell through the cracks. The real breaking point, the moment he carried into that sunrise, came a week later, when he overheard another conversation. This time between me and my husband. I had said, "Some days I feel like I'm failing at everything." And that was it. Just that one line. But for a child who had already placed himself inside the word, everything, it was too much. That night, he didn't eat dinner. He went to bed early. He didn't say goodnight. And still, I missed the signs. I didn't know that he spent the whole night awake. I didn't know he cried into his pillow. I didn't know he was gathering the courage to ask me the one question no child should ever have to ask. "Mom, do you still want me here?" So when he tapped my shoulder before sunrise, when he stood at my bedside with those quiet, trembling eyes, when he whispered that question, it wasn't sudden. It was the echo of months. Years even. Of small moments I brushed aside. Of quiet fears he nurtured alone. Of misunderstandings that grew into shadows. He carried all of it into that morning. And he placed it at my feet with a single question. A question that finally forced me to stop, to look, to understand. A question that would change everything. I don't know how long I sat there on the bathroom floor. Minutes? Maybe more. All I remember is the way my son's small hand rested on my knee, steady and warm, as if he somehow understood a part of my pain, pain I had never spoken out loud. When I finally stood up, my legs felt heavy, but his grip stayed firm, guiding me back to the bed like I was the child and he was the parent. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and tried to smile. "I'm okay," I whispered. He only looked at me, the way children do when they know you're lying but don't know how to call you out. And then he did something I'll never forget. He climbed into my lap, wrapped his arms around my neck, and tucked his forehead against mine. No words. No questions. Just presence. And that was when the memories came. Not in a gentle wave, no. They hit me like thunder rolling through a quiet sky. The memory I avoided for years. I was 21 the night everything changed. My mother had come home late from her shift at the hospital. She looked tired, so tired that I could practically feel the exhaustion leaking from her bones. But she still smiled at me. She always smiled at me first. And then, out of nowhere, we had that argument. It wasn't even about something important. I think it started with me asking why she never came to my college orientation. Why she was always working. Why she made promises she couldn't keep. I said words that didn't sound like me. Sharp, fast, and full of hurt I didn't even realize I had been holding. She didn't raise her voice. Not once. She just kept trying to explain. Trying to reach me. Trying to tell me she was doing her best. But I didn't want her best. I wanted her. My voice was loud. Hers stayed soft. Too soft. And then she said the sentence that haunted me for years. "You'll understand when you're a mother." The argument ended with me slamming my bedroom door. I remember that sound. The echo of wood against wood, like a knife that split the night. I never apologized. Not even when I woke up the next morning and found out she was gone. A car accident. Instant. No goodbye, no last hug, no chance to fix the cracks between us. And for the next 10 years, I carried something heavier than grief. I carried guilt. The kind that stains you from the inside. The kind that teaches you to smile without ever feeling it. My son's silence broke something in me. As I held my son in my arms, that old pain rose up again. Raw, hot, familiar. My breathing grew uneven. My throat tightened. And for a moment, I felt like that angry, stubborn 21-year-old girl again. The girl who didn't know what she was losing. The girl who thought mothers were unbreakable. And then my son whispered, barely audible, "Mom, I don't want you to feel alone." Something inside me cracked open. I pulled him closer, burying my face in his hair, inhaling that soft scent of childhood, soap and innocence and morning air. "Why would you think I'm alone?" I asked, though my voice trembled. He shrugged against my shoulder. "Sometimes, you look like you're remembering something that hurts." I froze. He noticed. My 6-year-old noticed. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt seen. Trying to be the mother I lost. I carried my son to the small reading corner we made together. Pillows stacked high, a tiny lamp in the shape of a moon, and his favorite blanket draped like a tent. We sat there, him wrapped around me like a koala, refusing to let go. "Do you want to talk about what woke you up?" I asked gently. He nodded. But then he shook his head. Then nodded again. Finally he sighed, a tiny frustrated sigh. I don't know how to say it," he admitted. And I felt my chest warm with tenderness. How many times had I felt that exact way growing up? "It's okay," I said. "Sometimes feelings don't come out as words. You can try slowly." He fiddled with the sleeve of my shirt. "I had a dream," he whispered. But it didn't feel like a dream. My heart tightened. "What do you mean?" He leaned back just enough to look into my eyes. And what he said next sent a shiver racing down my spine. "Someone was calling you." He swallowed hard. "In my dream, someone was calling your name." I blinked, confused. "Who?" He shook his head slowly. "I don't know. But they sounded sad." My breath caught. "Sad how?" He pressed his lips together, trying to find the right picture. Like they were crying. but also like they were trying to tell you something important. A cold whisper crawled across my skin. My hands tightened around him without meaning to. He didn't seem afraid of the dream. He wasn't describing a nightmare. He was describing a message. And then he said the words that made my heart stop completely. They kept saying, "She still needs to forgive you." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Every sound in the room faded. The ticking clock, the humming refrigerator, even my son's small breaths against my chest. His words sat between us like something fragile and dangerous. "She still needs to forgive you." I felt my heartbeat in my throat. My vision blurred for a second, and I had to blink hard to steady myself. "Who said that to you?" My voice came out softer than I intended, almost pleading. My son's eyes searched mine, curious but not scared. "I don't know," he whispered. I couldn't see them, but it sounded like a lady. A lady. Something inside me twisted sharply. I wanted to dismiss it. I wanted to smile and say, "Dreams are just dreams, sweetheart." I wanted to protect him from the heaviness I'd carried for years. But I couldn't speak. Because he wasn't just describing a dream. He was describing the one sentence that had lived in my ribs since the night I lost my mother. The truth I never spoke out loud. I swallowed hard. In all these years, I had never told anyone the full story. Not even my husband. Not even my closest friend. The argument. The words. The door. The silence that followed. The guilt that reshaped me in ways even I didn't understand. I had buried it under responsibilities, under motherhood, under everyday routines, like folding laundry over a growing crack in the floor. But children have a way of seeing the fractures adults hide. I brushed my fingers gently through my son's hair. "Sweetheart," I said slowly, "what made you wake me up?" He hesitated. I heard her voice again. Not in the dream. In the house. A cold rush ran down my spine. "Where?" My whisper barely stirred the air. He pointed toward the hallway with a little, trembling finger. "Near the kitchen." I closed my eyes. It could have been imagination. It could have been a leftover feeling from the dream. But something in the way he said it. Something calm, certain, unafraid. It made my chest ache in a very old, very familiar way. My son looked into me, not at me. He leaned closer, as if trying to understand something. Then he asked a question that cracked me open. "Mom, did you do something wrong to someone?" I flinched. Not visibly. At least I tried not to, but inside, my body recoiled. My son had no idea how precise that question was. No idea how many nights I had stayed awake replaying the same few moments of my life. "Why do you ask?" I managed. He shrugged again. The lady sounded sad, but not angry. Sad but not angry. Just like my mother during our last argument. My throat burned. My son watched my expression shift. Children always notice. Slowly, he took my hand, squeezing it with surprising strength. "Mom, you can tell me," he whispered. "I won't think you're bad." That did it. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. Not because I wanted to cry, but because something inside me had been waiting too long to be seen, even by someone so young. The decision I'd been avoiding. I pulled him close again, resting my chin on the top of his head. "Baby." My voice trembled. There was someone I hurt. A long time ago. He didn't move. He just listened. Someone I loved very much. I felt him nod slowly against me. I took a deep breath, letting the truth rise. Truth I had kept locked behind ribs and routine. "I never got to say sorry," I whispered. "And that has stayed with me." He lifted his head, eyes wide and gentle. "Is she the lady in my dream?" I opened my mouth to deny, to explain, to protect him. I wasn't sure, but nothing came out. Because deep down, I already knew the answer. And that realization shook me in a way nothing else had. "Maybe she wants you to say it now." My son's voice was tiny, almost shy. But there was something in his tone. Something steady. Something wise in a way children shouldn't be. "Maybe she's waiting for you," he added softly. "Maybe she wants you to stop hurting." That broke me. Finally, fully, quietly. I closed my eyes and felt years of tightly held emotions push their way to the surface. grief and guilt and longing blending into something I couldn't name. My son wiped my tears with the palm of his hand, like I'd done for him so many times. And then he said the sentence that felt like a key turning inside a locked door. Mom, maybe it's time to forgive yourself. I inhaled sharply. Forgive myself. I had spent years wishing for forgiveness. From a woman who wasn't here anymore. But forgiving myself? I had never even considered it possible. His little hand stayed on my cheek. Warm. Steady. Almost guiding. And for the first time, something shifted inside me. A small, unfamiliar feeling. A soft beginning. A crack in the wall I built around my heart. I didn't answer my son right away. His words, maybe it's time to forgive yourself, kept circling around me, gently but insistently, like a hand nudging a door that had been shut for far too long. I held him close, trying to steady the tremor in my breath. But inside, memories were waking up, quiet, old, and painful. Ones I had locked away so deeply that even thinking about them made my chest tighten. He rested against me, content, trusting, unaware that he had just touched the deepest wound in my life. And that wound had a name. My mother. The day everything broke. I did not plan to think about her that morning. But memories don't ask permission. They arrive the moment your heart softens enough to let them in. I felt myself drift backward. Back to my mother's kitchen. The warm yellow lights, the smell of ginger tea, the sound of her wooden bangles tapping the counter when she moved. I used to love those sounds. But the day everything broke, those same sounds felt sharp, loud, unbearable. I could still see it as if I were standing there again. She was wiping the table when I said the words that changed the course of our lives. Words said too fast. Words I didn't mean. Words I didn't take back. And the silence that followed. It was heavier than any argument we ever had. She looked at me, not angry, not harsh, just deeply hurt. The kind of hurt that makes someone step back, even if they love you. I didn't chase her. I didn't apologize. I didn't try. Not then. Not when I still had the chance. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And then the call came. And, "I'm sorry" became a sentence I carried only inside my chest. My son's presence pulled me back. I was still holding him, but the weight of the past felt heavier than his small body. He shifted a little, looking up at me with those clear, honest eyes. "Did you remember something, Mom?" I nodded, my throat tight. He didn't push. He didn't ask for details. Children know when not to. His silence was soft and patient. I brushed a hand through his hair. "There are things I should have said a long time ago," I murmured. He blinked slowly, thoughtful. "You can still say them," he whispered. "Even if the person is gone." His innocence stunned me. I had spent years believing that apologies had expiration dates, that forgiveness could not reach the living once the person who needed to hear it was gone. But my son, he didn't see the world that way. To him, an apology wasn't about who heard it. It was about who needed to say it. And maybe he was right. A quiet, unsettling realization. I tried to steady my breath, but the room felt different, as if something unseen had shifted. As if my son's dream had peeled back a layer I had been afraid to touch. The hallway outside our room felt strangely still. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't alone in the house. Not in a frightening way. More like in a watched-over way. My son sat up suddenly, looking toward the doorway. Not scared. Just curious. "Mom," he whispered. "I think she wants you to talk." A shiver ran through me, not of fear, but of recognition. Because deep down, I knew exactly who he meant. And I knew exactly what conversation I had been avoiding for years. The question I had been running from. I swallowed, feeling the weight of what he was asking without asking. "Do you think she's here?" The words slipped out of me before I could stop them. My son didn't answer right away. He tilted his head, considering, feeling, sensing in that unexplainable way children do. Then he nodded. "Not like a ghost," he said quietly. "More like someone who wants you to finally rest." Rest. A word I hadn't felt in a long, long time. My son reached for my hand again, his small fingers curling into mine. "Mom, You don't have to be scared. And there it was. The truth I had been resisting. I wasn't scared of her. I was scared of facing myself. Scared of remembering who I was before regret shaped me into someone quieter, smaller, more careful. My son leaned against me, trusting, warm. His presence felt like a lantern in a dark room. And slowly, very slowly, I felt myself taking the first step toward a part of my life I thought I had buried forever. The first step toward forgiveness, not from my mother, but from Missile.